Hello listeners from Roy Damari of InSam. This week I'm going to speak somewhat about the past but also about the present and the whole idea of trying to figure out what will happen from what is happening at the moment. But I'd like to start with a little bit of nostalgia and ask you if you remember the year 2007. I'm sure most of you do. Back in January 2007 I was working part-time with Bridport and Company, the bond brokers, and I had come across the idea that there might be trouble brewing in the so-called subprime market for loans, mortgage loans. And I reported on this, and I have to admit it was because of HSBC in the USA announcing that they'd given up on that sector, were pulling out. And I thought that was really a sign of danger. And I warned the clients of Bridport and became a bit of a hero because indeed later on everything fell apart in the subprime market. First, in that August, a whole number of banks were forced to merge, and the many mortgage-backed securities which came out of the process of securitizing the mortgage loans of these subprime borrowers, those securities lost an enormous amount of value as people realized that the assets behind them were worth far less than they thought, and so that spread throughout the world, causing the mergers and so on forced by the US government in the summer, August of 2007, which went on and on and on, and which culminated in the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers in the summer of 2008. So I felt very personally involved in all this process because I did see it coming, and now the question is something similar going on in the financial markets and also, I would add, in the political arena? I'll come back to that. But in the meantime, do you also remember the story of Northern Rock? That also happened in the year 2007, but it wasn't directly linked to the subprime crisis in the USA. Rather, it was a case of them lending too much to too many people and not having enough funds to actually do it with the deposits they had. So there was some link in the sense that they were mortgage problems, and so Northern Rock would go to the general market to borrow money from other banks in order to lend the money out to the mortgage borrowers. And that led to a great disequilibrium, shall I put it that way, in their accounts, and the government in the end bailed them out. And you might remember the great queues of people trying to pull out their balances. And when you have a bank run like that, there's no stopping it until the government comes in and basically prints money or says, we'll bail you out, we'll be the lender of last resort, and away you go. One of the writers from the Harry Dent organization has also proven a bit nostalgic this week, and I received their publications, and the one I've just received and read by Rodney Johnson is looking back, but very angrily looking back, to say that all these folk that made a lot of money during the subprime crisis, that's the mortgage brokers, the local banks, some but not all of the Wall Street banks, they all did very well out of it. The losers were the investors in the mortgage-backed securities, and also the general public, in that the government, in the USA at least, stepped in to buy up banks. By the way, they did that in the UK with Northern Rock, but apparently made money in the long run, because when it was finally put together again, they were able, the government that is, to get their money back. Oh, bravo. Rodney is particularly upset because all these people that made a lot of money with a lot of deception went totally unpunished. Personally, either their corporations or their banks had to pay money, or the general public in nationalising the banks, buying into their shares, bailing them out. And so people got away scot-free. Rodney says he no longer trusts what he hears from any of these organizations. That's the mortgage brokers, the investment banks, the rating agencies. Remember, they gave AAA to basically junk bonds, and the bankers in general. I incline to agree with him in this sense of distrust about what they give us in their propaganda. He doesn't believe the debt woes are completely behind us, and he makes a strong appeal to each of us looking after our own affairs. That in a way is a very American approach, but I have to agree with it. Take care of your own savings, investments and pensions. By all means use the government systems, but don't rely on them as the only source, for example, of retirement pension. Back to the implications of political forecasting in the context of what I've been speaking of regarding financial forecasting. When Trump first won the presidency, I thought the biggest problem he would have to face is that the Republican Party didn't like him and would in due course fall out with him. And so I said that would happen. And in fact, it is now happening. I am now witnessing what I forecast would happen, that the distrust between him, the dislike indeed between him and the Republican Party is growing. And he's done something this week which, in a sense, is admirable. Do I find myself admiring Trump? Hard to imagine. But he has actually said he will go for a tax reform bill in collaboration with the Democrats. He is actually reaching out to collaborate with the opposition party in Congress. That seems a good idea, but it has all sorts of fun implications about how much he will then still be trusted, or be trusted still less, by the Republicans. And even for the Democrats it's not too obvious, because there are plenty of Democrats who think that it would be a crime against humanity to collaborate with Donald Trump. What it does mean is that Trump will probably be a president unhooked from conventional party relationships. He'll decide what to do as best as he wants to do, or his advisors tell him what to do. Whether support he needs comes from the Republicans or the Democrats or both, or some of both, because we have to remember that both parties are themselves totally split. In fact, in the FT there's a suggestion that there are now at least 4 parties in the USA, because the Democrats have the sort of the Hillary wing, and then the very left wing of Bernie Sanders. Likewise, the Republicans have the pro-Trump group and the establishment, the Republican establishment group, and never the twain shall meet. So the same wag in the FT suggested that the 5th party will now be Trump himself. He'll have a one-person party and do his own thing. Except that, once again, we have to look at the White House to see if everybody agrees in that. And of course they don't. There's a revolving door of people coming in and being sacked. He's taken on a young lady now to be his spokesperson. How long she'll last, we'll see. I think the most important person there for the moment is in fact John Kelly, because he's trying to put order into it. And I have to ask, how can anybody bring order into an establishment headed ostensibly by Donald Trump? Well, if I've given you things to ponder on this week, I'm pleased. And if the conclusion you come to is that we are in dangerous and unpredictable times, that's also a good thing to assume. And as a result, I hope you're still going to be quite conservative in how you look after your investments and savings. It's the only way to be in this period of great unpredictability and high volatility. Speak to you again next week.